Okay, I'll just take you through some more tools in Photoshop that you'll be using next week in the tutorial. First one being cropping. So I'll just quickly jump over to Photoshop, got my document open. As it has come out of the camera, though the resolution has changed but not resampled, I haven't resampled the image, I've just upped the resolution and maintained the number of pixels within the document and shrunk the document size. I'm going to jump over to my cropping tool, fourth one down, and what you can do is just drag an area from left to right or right to left, whatever you want to do, and that selects a portion of the image, and when you hit enter it discards the rest of the image. So all of that pixel data has been lost, and you can see that here in image size, where we had an image that was 3000 pixels before, it's now 1194 in width. Document size is reduced and the resolution has stayed the same. There are a series of commands that you can do that by filling in these. So let's say you wanted it the size of a A5 sheet. You write in 21 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters, and you can write in 300 pixels, but you can also leave that blank. And if we drag left from right, hit enter, that's now turned that into a image that is at A5. Okay, so the next part is based on selection of pixels within Photoshop. So I'm going to leave this image to the side. I know it's A5. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a canvas, an A5 canvas. Still work within dragging and dropping onto a canvas. I strongly recommend it. Choose international paper, A5 in size. Change the settings to CMYK because this is going to eventually be a printed document, and open it up. Okay, so there's a canvas that I can drop my information onto and work from. Alright, and then if I do that using the move tool, just as I did in the last week, I'll grab that pixel data, drop it onto the map, and it will fit exactly to size. Now, you know, as you get better at it and you have a more thorough understanding of how Photoshop uses data to create images, feel free to just work within these images. But just in the early stages, if this is the first time using Photoshop, try to always imagine things within the physical sense, and it's not going to lead to badly resolved imagery. So I've just dragged all that data, and the other thing is that I can bring that up if I stuff this up too much. So because that is layer information in a new file, it has no bearing on the original. Alright, so I can drag this around just as I showed you last week, but the tools that we're going to work with are the next three. The marquee selection tool, the lasso tool, and the selection tool using the quick selection option. Now when you hold down on any of these, more options come up, okay, and or more types of tools come up, and each one will have its own settings in the options bar. Okay, so very briefly I'll show you a couple of selections. If we want to just do a rectangular selection, now what happens with the selection is you're actually telling the software to select a patch of pixels that you want to edit in a particular way. Okay, so in the case of this selection, say you want to delete it, as long as you've got the layer selected, you can hit the delete button, it will delete those pixels. There's more selection options under here. So you can go select, you can modify it using some of these tools. Feather is one that we'll show you. Otherwise, you know, the really basic one is if you want to select something, but then delete the inverse of what you selected, you use select inverse, and you can now delete that pixel data around your selection. So going backwards, now you can add to and take away from selections. Alright, so we could use, let's say we're going to work towards getting this building without any context. And what I want is I want the building to just sit on the background, but no sky and no mountains in the background, no buildings in the background. Okay, That's my intent. I'll show you a few ways of doing it. The first is just doing it manually. So we can use a series of selection tools, say the marquee and the lasso in a combination, to delete all of that context. So here I'm just going to use the marquee tool, the rectangular one, to select big areas. I can add to these selections by holding shift, and if you look really closely when you do it, there's a little plus sign that appears next to your cursor. If you wanted to take away from it, let's say what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, select all this sky here. This is fine to do it this way, but just know that once you delete all of this information, it's gone. Right, what I can do is, let's say I want to tidy that edge up. I can use the marquee tool, and I've selected by default polygon one because it's a rigid shape. I'll turn that feather off down to 0. I can use Alt to subtract. I hold Alt on my keyboard to subtract away from a selection, like so. Alright, so you can work your way around the document like so, adding and subtracting to a selection like this. So I'm just going to pause it and I'll show you how this is done, and then what we can do is use feather to refine the edge. Okay, so just coming to the end of all this selection, what I'm going to use is just the magnetic lasso tool to hold on to pixels that are very similar and reduce this shortcut that I made. So you can see that the magnetic tool will hold on to an edge, and with practice your ability to use the mouse to select will improve. Alright, so that there is a selection. Now I can, if I'm just happy with that, I can hit delete. But if you do zoom in, this happens on bigger documents, it's okay at A5, you'll see the edge is a little bit frayed. There's a little bit of sky still left in it. And especially when I get around here, you can see I've just gone and chopped off the top of those plants. So I'm not 100% happy with that edge. What I can do is I can feather it. Right now, feathering just puts a gradient on the edge of a selection. So when that gradient, when you go to delete something or alter something from a selection, it'll do it from a dark value to a light value. And we can modify our selection using go to the select menu, down to modify, and over to feather, and we can specify a general feathering distance in pixels. And just to exaggerate it, what I'll do is I'll do 20 pixels so you can see it. Now the little marching ant line, you can see deforms because this selection method creates an average across an edge. And if I delete, you'll see that it kind of has this glow because the pixels, it's diminished the amount of information on the pixels on the edge. If I had to exaggerate that even more, I've just undone that now. Feather. Let's go to 70 pixels. You can see the shape really changes, and it does kind of have this halo on it. But it's still not what I want. So undo again. If I want to have more control over that edge, I can use something called a quick mask. Okay, and what that does is it allows us to use tools such as the paintbrush to actually paint a selection, and we have a lot more control over it. So to switch a selection over to a quick mask, and I'll put my sky back on so I can see what I'm doing. And I've just undone to get back there, so you can go back through your history here as well. I'll hit Q, and what it does is it paints everything that's not in the selection, and then it leaves clear what is in my selection. And just from using a magnetic lasso tool and a polygon lasso tool with no feather, when we zoom in on it, the red is displayed as a really hard edge. Okay, it's not softened at all. So if you didn't have much time, you could probably just go into select, modify, and modify your edge using 1 or 2 pixel feather. If you want to have more control over that, what I recommend is using the paintbrush tool, set a size for the brush end, so you can see there I've changed the size to 94 pixels. and I've just clicked the mouse button, and what it's done is added to my selection, or subtracted from my selection I should say. Added or subtracted. But what we'll do is we'll jump that back to a really small point, and just the type of brush that you specify. There's hard brushes, there's soft brushes, there's dithered brushes, there's brushes in the shape of stars. It'll alter your selection accordingly to that brush as long as you're in quick mask mode. So the shortcut's Q, and these options here allow for a control on the opacity and how much you paint at a time. So you can see if I exaggerate it out here, you'll see that the gradient of the selection, gradient of the color of the quick mask that you're painting, will determine how much of that how much of that pixel edge you end up editing or taking information away from. So here we go. Like, I've just turned my opacity flow down to 50, and now down to 20, and here I'm just going to do it all the way down to say 5. So these techniques you may want to play with. And when we press Q and go back to the marching outline, it just creates an average. And just to show you, you can see that we've diminished the values of those pixels as we've painted with a lighter gradient. So I'm going to go back, I'll take that away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to soften up those edges using Quick Mask. I should also highlight that not only the paintbrush tool, but the other painting tools you can use as well to select. You can actually use the eraser, the paint bucket, and the burn and the dodge tools. So if you did want to do the inverse, use the paintbrush. Switch back over, and you can see there that the selection alters. Okay, and to just quickly demonstrate, again using Quick Mask and the paintbrush to select things, I've found a brush that actually gives kind of a scattered edge. And if I zoom right in, you can see that while I edit it, it creates kind of this weird bespeckled selection edge. If I go hit Q and go back to the original selection, you can see that it's very scattered. And if I delete right up close, it gives you a really good understanding of how it works. Alright, so by all means refine and practice refining your edges using this manual technique. I'm not going to go through and do it to the whole image because we just don't have time, but I just thought I'd highlight that you can do that. What I'm going to do is show another technique, one that's a lot quicker. We can use this tool called Quick Selection to get the rough outline really quickly. So we specify a brush, and it picks up common pixels for the selection. So all I do is click the the Quick Selection tool, and start plotting onto it. But the thing you do need to do is refine all these edges. So if we zoom in, you'll notice that it's kind of picked up the dark line, not the edge of the building. So we need to go in and just refine that a little bit. And it's picked up all the horizon. Oh, sorry, it has picked up the edge of the building, which is good, but not enough for the edge of the building. So really quickly, it has done its best job at creating a selection along an edge. Oops. But use the other tools to refine this. By adding and selecting to it. Do note that the Quick Selection tool does give kind of a feathered edge to the selection. It's not as hard as the polygon with no feather, although you can press anti-alias, and I think that this does alter the selection to be a little softer. Just try this now. Yeah, you can see that it's actually softened and graded that edge, and it's not as hard. So using a bunch of selection tools, I'm slowly working my way around this document. I'm adding to them, adding to the selection, and just cleaning it up generally. And I want to use all of the tools at my disposal, so I do jump into quick mode. I have been using the paintbrush to neaten it up, especially when I get to something like these plants. They'll be excellent. A really easy way to pick up plants is using something like this, zooming in a little bit more and using a small brush. Alright, just to select things. And then jump back out of quick mode, like so, and you can just test it by pressing the delete button and then spinning back. Alright, so we're getting close. I've just done a whole heap selection. I'm excluding the aerials, but by all means you can go in and you can paint onto the aerials. It's still a bit rough though, and there's some great selection. There's a great tool called Refine Edge. Okay, and when you switch it on, it brings up this little dialog box. We'll take it, and there's a whole heap of view modes. So if you are finding that you're working very well with quick mask, you can change to that. You can have the selection over black or over white. Over the layers if you have more layer information underneath, and you can reveal the original layer. So you can also learn these shortcuts and you find your way around it a little better. So let's say we want to clean this edge up a little bit and use some of the software to do the work for us. We'll go down to on white, and you can see bits of the building are kind of floating over the edge. We can, every selection will have an edge, and we can view that edge by pressing show radius. I'll just change it to black, sorry. And you'll see that that has a thickness. So the dithering, it also represents the dithering. And that kind of gives us the basic shape of our building. Now, we can refine that and make it wider if we need to. And that changes the selection edge. Or we can make it really crisp and small. We can also shift this edge here by using this shift edge command. So if you're finding that you're actually cutting a little bit too much with sky in the picture, or a little bit too much with building in the picture, you can shift that either, you shift that edge out or in comparison. So now we can have an output that is many different pieces. You can preserve what you've just done on that layer and have an output as a new layer, or you can output to the selection. Now I'm not going to use this, but I just wanted to highlight that it's there. What I'm going to do is push on with creating what's called a mask. Okay, and I'm not going to refine the edges anymore either. I'm kind of happy with that because I know that if I print that at A5, you're going to get a pretty solid looking image without doing too much more to it. You might put a blur on the edge just so it tricks the eye a little bit, I guess. And we can put blurs on things using filters, but it's better to apply such things to a mask. Now, a mask is where these pixels have been selected. What it'll do, it'll either reveal those pixels or it'll hide those pixels. So it doesn't actually delete the original information. There is a mask dialog box here. So we can go to Window and open up masks. And we will go through this more in the tutorial, so we'll make sure you ask questions when it comes up. What we do here is we add a pixel mask. Okay. Now what that does is it creates this thing that sits aside next to our layer, our pixel information on our layer. And what it's doing is it's hiding everything where the black's represented, and it's revealing everything where there's white. And you can, as you work, you can make that edge, or you can use grey to kind of reveal things. And I'll show you what I mean here. Within the controls, if we change the density, this becomes grey, and it starts to reveal more of the image that's underneath. I believe this is feathering the edge. So these are very general, and you can see when you do it up here, that the edge of the mask actually starts to feather and blur a little bit. But I'm not going to use those. We can also refine the edge of the mask, just as we did with the selection before. Going here, and it opens up the same dialog, and you can edit your edge of your selection, or the edge of the mask, in the same way. And you can output to the layer that you've already using, or you can output to another layer and then turn that layer off to preserve the original information. You can also invert, which is exactly what we want to do. So you can see that I've just flipped it, and it's blocking or masking all of the sky information. There's a few other little toggles here. You can disable it, and using this one you can apply it, so it actually using the mask, it deletes all the pixel information from the image. And that's just the basics. And the thing is with these masks is you can actually, instead of grabbing the layer information, you can grab the mask and you can edit it or apply filters to the mask instead of the raw data. So let's say we did want to blur this edge a little bit. We can apply a blur to a specified number of pixels just to kind of soften that up a bit. And the edge needs a little bit more refinement, but for now I'm kind of happy with that. Alright, so that's just a few selection tools. And the best thing about that is you can, you could potentially put a sky under that, so another layer with other information. Now this is going to look pretty crude, but I'll do it anyway just as a really quick demonstration. We might have a layer that sits underneath this that is not this horrible multicolor, but kind of a graded black, or graded. Now if we apply that to here, you can see that that's putting pixel information on another layer that's behind it. So you could actually import photo information or other skies or drawings, and put this, start to lay out your document with drawings sitting in front of perspectives, etc., etc. So yeah, we'll go over more of this in the shoot this week, and that should summate the technical lecture for today.